All right, good evening, everybody. Thank you for attending the next SAC Region 4 meeting. Tonight's meeting will be mixed use and cultural resources. This may be the last time you hear from me tonight. I'm going to pass over the mic to Lorenzo and Jesse. They're going to be running the show for us this evening. So, well, yes, after Ann, of course. So thank you, Ann.
I want to welcome everybody and welcome people in the audience and staff, everybody's here. I just wanted to look at the agenda and do the meeting notes, but I wanted to say something first. This first time I've really read every word of the meeting notes, maybe twice. The presentations we had last they're both very good. And there was so much information about and I just think it's
have a survey. When kind of easy to remember, you can type it surveymonkey.com/R/247 and so please, if you haven't done so yet, take that survey and tell the people you know that is one of the main things that folks that are not this big from home give us some feedback about things they would like to see. Yet our announcement is that we do have 2 new SAC members who were appointed. Amy Bill. We did have senators that participated in the holding that meeting.
So this came from the higher ups of we had two members that were replaced. One never attended a single meeting. One attended 2 meetings. Staff noticed this before with a recommendation to 2 people who were on the board are being nominated for you all. They were basically for 16, 17, so So that motion, that resolution was created through county council resolution and passed last Monday at county council. They're both from the passage unit.
So, from that, then let's move into tonight's meeting, format. We're gonna have two presentations, and Q&A. The first one is gonna be, by the cultural resources, section of the planning and zoning. And we have staff here. And then after that's gonna be, Jessica and I actually presenting on mixed use, and community design. And after that, we're gonna have a quick break. And then we're gonna start our breakout groups like we've been doing lately around 7:30, hopefully. Because then we'll share what happened during the breakout groups. And then we'll get out of here by 8:45 because it's going to be about that time. So this is the outline of the meeting. Obviously, we're gonna have public comment for that being said, you can get begin the first presentation, like local resources. You, wherever you like.
All right. Can everyone online hear me? All right. Eric, can they hear me online? Is this mic working? Okay. We're good. Okay, great. All right, I'm going to mosey over here. Thank you all for having me tonight. My name is Anastasia Polis. I'm the archaeological sites planner with the cultural resources section. We are actually based in the Office of Planning and Zoning. And I'm here with my colleague, Jane Cox, who's sitting over there. So glad she can make it to join us tonight. Fount of wisdom, so we have some stories to share. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the function of historic preservation in Anne Arundel County, how it's kind of working, and we're going to focus on Region 4 as we talk about that. I'm excited to talk about this because I actually live in Region 4, so it's personal for me too. All right, next slide, please. So why do we care about preservation? Why is it a function of government? You might read some of this language in our general development plan through the county, but generally, there are quite a few things that we've noticed over time. And I think everyone can agree on that, the first off is these historic buildings. They give us that sense of community and history and heritage. They tie people together. They tie memories together. They give us that sense of place. They also, another factor that people have been talking about a lot lately is how saving historic buildings is actually more efficient, energy efficient. It's greener. It reduces our resource consumption. So this is something that a lot of studies have started to show and demonstrate. It also, it not only gives that sense of heritage, but it kind of increases the attraction of a community too. It gives that that history, that longevity, and it's been shown to improve property values and strengthen the local economy as a result. It's a place people want to go to, like old Sabrina Park here. It also, historic preservation, the action of it, it enhances our quality of life. And I have a picture here, and Jane will tell me I'm unashamedly including my dog walking on the V&A Trail, where we have the Early Heights train station from the the late 19th century trail, and we also have an interpretive sign that tells you a little bit about the history. So here we have this amazing reuse of a historic landscape, preservation of historic landscape. People can go through this thread that runs up and down Region 4 that ties it together. And I think, our section hasn't only realized the potential for this trail, but also the local historical society in Sabrina Park. They've done some really neat things. Rec and Parks, they recently did this restoration. And you can see, it gives that, it enhances the quality of life, I think, for people in the whole of the county. It's a place for people to be able to have a continuous walk or a bike ride. There aren't many places like that. It also, historic preservation fosters, civic beauty. I think we have a, nice historic landscape here, but it also benefits the education and welfare of county citizens. So we have the opportunity with archaeology and with our historic sites, with these scenic historic landscapes, and our historic cemeteries to tell the history of our past in a tangible way. So next slide, please. So what do we do about it? The cultural resources section, we do a lot of development review through the Office of Planning and Zoning. So if there's a site plan grading permit or a building permit, a variance application, modification application, special exception, we're going to look at it to see if it's going to impact something that's important to Anne Arundel County, to Anne Arundel County's history. And it gives us a chance to really evaluate whether or not this is something we really want to allow as a loss. And the code provides some protection for that. So we also coordinate with county and state agencies. For example, the Early Heights train station, we coordinated with Maryland Historical Trust on that restoration. We also administer a historic preservation tax credit program. I forgot to point out our webpage on the first slide. It's pretty easy to remember. aacounty.org/CR, short for cultural resources. You need me louder? Okay, sorry. So aacounty.org/CR, we have information about our tax credit program there. Am I just yelling in the mic too? Sorry. Okay, I apologize if I'm blasting out your drums over there. But we, one of our functions too is to talk to the layperson on the ground who wants to do voluntary preservation or the nonprofit. So we provide technical guidance and support. We also do a lot of public outreach and workshops. And in addition to this, we have an archaeology lab and a curation facility that we manage. And in that lab, in that curation facility, we have over 6 million artifacts from Anne Arundel County that tell us the story of our past. So next slide, please. So what can we protect? What are historic resources? What does this all mean? So right here, I'm throwing up the definitions that we actually have in our county code. So historic resources consist of properties, buildings, structures, districts, and archaeological sites that represent county history, that are associated with the lives of historically significant persons, that have historically significant architectural value, or that are capable of yielding information important to the county's history or prehistory. The county inventory of historic resources means properties that are listed on the Maryland Inventory of Historic Properties, the National Register, or the National Register of Historic Landmarks. So we have these two distinctions that we have. So yeah, you can proceed. We're pretty unique compared to other local jurisdictions. Anne Arundel County is a standout. We have some awesome code protections that other counties don't have. We also are different in that we do not have a historic preservation commission or an architectural review board. So everything is reviewed through the cultural resources section, the Office of Planning and Zoning, as it mimics the Section 106 process of the National Historic Preservation Act, uses the same professional guidance of the National Register. So that definition where we're talking about, there was a significant person of local history. There was it had a significant architectural design, some kind, or it conveyed it was significantly conveyed a sense of place. Those type of factors, that's a checklist register. But we apply that specifically to how important it is to us locally. We're not looking at National Register significance. We have a lot of National Register sites in Region 4 and throughout the county. We even have a National Historic Hall. But it's automatically considered important. It's locally, but other sites that might not merit national significance on a national level. So back to region 4. We provide recommendations based on our professional expertise as to whether or not it's considered significant using those criteria that's been established by in the field of historic preservation through the National Historic Preservation Act and so on. We also protect archaeology sites, significant archaeology sites that can give you further information about history, you know, that have continued untapped potential to tell us a story of what happened in the past. They are considered significant and they shall be avoided and protected. We also protect preservation easement through development code. We have to know they exist, and the development code enables us to protect them when they are on site of a development. And so they get a preservation easement and a 20-foot buffer along with the right of way for access. We also protect scenic and historic roads that development must comply with a list of 14 criteria. You know, the historic vegetation must be preserved. It doesn't change the scenic outlook of the road. You know, there's this list in our code, and I actually have copies of that I can hand out for everyone to look at. So the development must comply with that. So again, it's all development code driven. Okay, next slide, please. So with Region 4, we have some of our most significant archaeology sites here, some of our most significant historic sites. We have basically everything in Region 4. I was a bit overwhelmed when I started looking at this, and I wish I could talk to you for 5 hours about how interesting Region 4 is. We have some of our earliest and most significant Native American sites here. The earliest colonial settlements in Arundel County that have been identified on the Project Peninsula within Region 4. In fact, Jane helped find them, so she can tell you about that later. And so a number of those 17th century sites are listed or eligible for the National Register of Historic Places. And you might have heard of Burley's Townland, Town Neck, Sullivan Cove, or recently doing excavations at Whitehall that have been giving us information about the enslaved population that lived on that plantation. So, you know, the history here is, it continues on too into the 18th and 19th century. Kinder Farm, it's a fascinating place. Early 20th century farms, domestic and region beach resorts. It's such an interesting place when it comes to early 20th century history. So you name it, we've got it with archaeology. Next slide. How's my we have a number of historic parks that are uniquely important to the county historically and also a tremendous asset to our public, such as Fort Smallwood Park. We also have this fascinating historic district of Gibson Island in Region 4. And I bet you didn't know they actually had a lot in common, Gibson Island and Fort Smallwood. Yeah, they're both listed on the Maryland Inventory of Historic Properties. They're both likely eligible for the National Register of Historic Places. They were both designed or were a result of planning by the Olmsted brothers. I should phrase that. Fort Smallwood, we know, is a in the Spanish-American War around at the end of the 19th century. But in the 1920s, Baltimore took it on and changed it to a public park as a beach resort. And that's when the Olmsted brothers stepped in. So it's we have these historic structures and districts in Region 4 that are both private property and public property. These early beach resorts are really exciting. We have these military and industrial structures like you see at Fort Smallwood, those 18th to 19th century farmhouses we'll talk about a little later, and historic train stations. And I know you all know about a lot of these places, so that's just talk about that. So next slide, please. We also have a lot of endangered species. That don't have a tombstone. There's a saying, not mark a grave. So there that may not. A tombstone does not equal a grave. For most endangered sites, we have historic family cemeteries, church cemeteries, unmarked cemeteries. We do have pet cemeteries, but our code does not protect those. I just wanted to let you guys know because I got story. For cemeteries and archaeology sites, there's a bit of a process to get there, but historic structures, if it's not designated, it's a lot harder to protect it at the time of a development application, or if it's not on our recorded on our inventory. So we have a remarkably small inventory of sites given the large size of Region 4. So the only way to really capture those important structures is to make sure our survey and inventory is complete, which is a challenge. There's only 3 people on our staff. We also have a number of underrepresented resources, and this is a question I'm going to ask you all later during the breakout session who joins us. What resources you don't see being recognized as historically important. And we have been looking at our inventory and we're finding, the African American heritage is not well represented. The early 20th century is not understood as historically significant, so we're losing it rapidly. So goodbye, the Civil Rights Act, World War II history, World War I history, early beach resort history. We're losing that rapidly. We also have this unique circumstance in Anne Arundel County of dealing with coastal climate impacts. So I do have a couple, these are just maps to demonstrate that like the majority of our historic properties that are potential historic properties in the Pasadena floodplain are in the early 20th century, dating to that beach resort era. And we can see clusters of these buildings where we have potential historic districts that have never been looked at, never evaluated, and we're losing the infrastructure that what makes them interesting and that historic character of them rapidly. So that's just a few observations, and to wrap up really quickly, next slide, please. I just want you all to keep an eye out for what's left out there. Mountain Roads, is an example of that. It's one of our most historic roads in the county. We see it on 19th, 18th century maps. And here we have this historic crossroads in Jacobsville, and you might not notice it at first. Telephone poles, electric signs, little, commercial buildings. But as you're driving along, you're going through, this amazing African-American history with the Mount Zion Church, and that was established in the 19th century with a cemetery and this Rosenwald School dating to the early 20th century. There's this tremendous history of African-American land tracts, so we don't even really understand yet. We haven't captured. That's in Johnsontown going to Jacobsville. And then you have these, another Methodist church, Magathie Methodist Church dating in the 19th century that's still standing right across the road from its historic cemetery, next to the old Temperance Lodge. And if you keep down the road, you'll find the Armiger Store and Post Office sitting right there next to Mountain Road. You might not have noticed it driving along, but that's the oldest store in probably all of Region 4, possibly one of the oldest, it's one of the oldest in the county. And these are among the oldest churches in Region 4. So we're seeing our historic crossroad communities rapidly disappearing due to development pressure and all these other factors. But next slide, please. So we have a few suggestions for things we can do. We want to look at expanding and updating and diversifying our inventory, capturing those pieces of history that we haven't been able to capture yet and share with the public. And so that's a big number one. We also need to look at our regulations to enhance and improve them. I mentioned there's a couple loopholes for protection. And so we need some new regulatory tools and incentives. And we need to look at how we can make this preservation tax credit program be more versatile. So that's just a couple thoughts from us, but I'm going to wrap up right there and open it to the floor. Okay. Thank you. Sure.
Question, two questions. So preservation easement, here is. So
no, with a development application, it's the developer, the applicant is responsible for identifying all resources on within the development property. So just like they need to identify where their forest conservation is going to be, or where the stormwater is going to be, or where their utilities are going to be, they have to also identify the cultural resources that merit protection. So our county code requires preservation of significant sites. So if the development application is to be approved and there's a significant site, the county requires the preservation easement for a significant structure. And it's on a case-by-case basis on what that means. might be an exterior easement or an interior easement. Or even, like a cultural landscape easement, those are very complicated. The cemeteries are very straightforward. You can't mess with the cemetery. You got to leave it in its location. You got to give it a sensitive buffer. So these easements, like the cemetery easement, it gets it in the land records. It identifies the boundary of that cemetery. It provides a means of access for descendants. And it ensures that people understand you cannot go through the cemetery. Yes. And similarly with the archaeology sites, except for the right-of-way requirement. Well, we do have triggers for requiring survey. And so if we consider, say someone wanted to develop Kinder Farm Park, our park, we would tell the county, there's some really interesting archaeological stuff going on there. So we need to do a phase one or an identification survey to identify any sites that might be there. When it comes to private development applications, the applicant is responsible for paying for the survey. They have to provide that report. They have to identify their resources. So they're responsible for that. We do with like single family homes. Yeah, we trigger that, or it's triggered by a previously identified site that's on the Maryland Archaeological Site Survey. If it wasn't evaluated sufficiently, then additional survey might be required, or it just might be immediately, we already know about it because it's already been surveyed, because it's registered, so we'll need an easement. But there's a few steps, and I can definitely elaborate on that. Yeah. They're required to hire a professional consultant, an archaeologist who meets the standards that for if we require an archaeology survey, or if we require a documentation of a historic resource, they have to meet professional guidelines that are established at the national level. If it's on the if it's on the inventory, or if there is a high archaeological potential, we require it. It's evaluated on a case-by-case basis because there's a lot of factors that go into that. For example, the level of existing disturbance on a site immediately decreases the amount of potential, and that can be identified. Sometimes things happen that weren't, yeah, so we, it's part of that process. We evaluate the site's sensitivity as, is there something archivally that makes us interested? Is there something on a historic map? Does the property look like it's still intact? It hasn't been deforested and graded. There's still integrity there. Have I heard that there might be a cemetery there because someone, mentioned it in the land records? There's a lot of things that go into it. So it's really difficult to give a black and white answer on the. Yes, please.
We're trying to evaluate. We are absolutely slammed with trying to keep up with these reviews. We essentially do a mini review of every single project. We review hundreds a month, and we do our own preliminary assessment based on all the resources that we have. We have incredible archival documentation, maps, GIS, and in that, I mean, we are doing a mini review before we make that determination that something has a high potential. To your earlier question about the easements, essentially we treat historic resources like forest conservation or wetlands. These things are irreplaceable. So that's why the easement requirement under permitting occurs. So it is something that's a requirement of permitting. But it really, we are doing a what we call kind of a mini phase review report on every single project that comes in. And I would say 15 to 20% end up going forward to having a full-on required archaeological survey or requirements under the code. I am happy to answer that.
Yeah. Well, it's a long answer. I was kidding there.
Anyone who's doing investigation research, et cetera, whether they have enough resources. Say, well, we can use that. Sounds like.
Yeah.
And I
Absolutely.
think it also, it provides, the development community, which with a much firmer target. When we come in and can only do something in a very cursory manner, and we know there's more information out there, but we don't have the resources to direct them in the shortest way possible to get to their development and goals. If we had more resources, the development would go smoother, faster, and it would end up with a better result, better preservation result, we think. So it's, it's a two-sided coin that, yes, we want, we would want to have more resources to do that, but it ultimately is to help make the development process more streamlined, quicker, and that's what everybody wants. So.
Hi.
I agree with you.
Thank you.
We also already saw the back. But I was just, you mentioned before about the extensive amount of Native American artifacts that we have. Do the indigenous folks here have a permanent presence in your office to make sure that they're brought to the whole, and if there's things that they would like returned, they can take them if there isn't, or that they get input and guidance on how to arrange those things? And if there isn't, what steps are being taken to bring those folks in?
So that's really managed at the state level. The Maryland Commission of Indian Affairs is established by the Maryland Historical Trust, and they work with the Piscataway Nation here. And so we have coordinated with them on past projects, and our curation facility is open to researchers. One of the things that we've been challenged with is making the data accessible, researchers and locals and descendants. And, we have questions all the time about stuff that's in our inventory or in our facilities. So right now, one of the things we're looking at is trying to make that data more accessible with a relational database, and try to get this more at the fingertips. So that's been a bit of a challenge with 6 million artifacts and only a 3-person staff. And we do have a few consultants work with us too, which has been a godsend. But it's a huge lift. We have such an interesting Native American history here in the county, and we're still just starting to tap away at it. So. Oh, sure. Mhm. Mhm.
Done.
I'm going to let Jane answer this one. It's a complex history.
So as you're probably aware, Anne Arundel County is a little bit rules averse. And back 25 years ago, when we created the Historic Preservation Program, there was discussion about, did we want to go down the road of doing a Historic Preservation Commission? That's a fairly conventional activity across the county or across the country. So with a Historic Preservation Commission, you have a layperson's group of, it doesn't have to be professionals. Those 7 people, sometimes it's 5, 7, 9, depending on how it's structured, are the ones that have the final say. And they are appointed by an elected official. So that commission then inserts itself into the planning process and the development process. So it's akin to the fact that we only have a planning advisory board in the county. And at the point that we were looking at the preservation options for how we could institute a plan, for preservation in the county, there wasn't really a place within the development system to be able to insert a independent citizen a board that would have actual veto authority over development. So that's kind of where the genesis of where we how we ended up with this system. And as Stacy mentioned earlier, we also what we've done is applied the same policy that the state and the federal government use, where they actually have the professional staff provides a professional recommendation as to whether something's historically significant and warrants preservation. And then through that professional review process, the determination is made. And there's, a lot of levels of evaluation that go into that. So you're not wrong that having a politically appointed person can change the winds of what gets preserved or not. And having been here for 25 years, I've seen the ups and downs. And sometimes when you have a very, strong preservation-based administration, you're in great shape. But if you have an administration that might not be as supportive of preserving things, that it definitely is something that I would really be interested to hear a conversation amongst the citizens to know how we could fix that within the framework of how the county does its development review. Well, yep. You should have given us the whole meeting, Lorenzo.
You want to take that?
Yep.
one?
So, so our scenic and historic roads program, in the development of that in the early 1990s, there was a commission that made recommendations. And in those recommendations, they said that roads should be of these different categories, and that's how we should eventually develop regulation to treat them. The categories were, one, that they should be preserved at all costs because they're incredibly scenic and important or historic. The next level down is protection, do what you can, but still recognize that development needs to occur. And then there was a category 3, which is recognition only. And the commission states clearly in their 1997 report that they didn't intend for any regulation to occur under category 3 roads. So that is a lot of the roads that are on that inventory. But unfortunately, as the whims of legislation might happen, the entire list got adopted, all equal bearing and equal weight. So what we're struck with now is that we've got roads that we know, like General's Highway at the mall, probably not something that we should be trying to apply protective measures to. But within the code, we have our 14 criteria. We are obligated to check the boxes, and we try to apply as much reason and logic as we can. But that's still the list that was given to us in the code and is adopted that we have to work with. So does that help kind of structure where the program came from? And that little piece of the puzzle is missing in what they put into the code in 2006. If they'd given us the categories, we could have done more logically. So.
All right, thank you. That was great. And don't forget that we can also discuss more at the tables later. So the way we're gonna do this after the break is actually you're gonna pick which table you wanna sit with. And I feel like everybody's gonna go to Jane and Stacy's table. So please, somebody bear with Jessica and I at the mixed use table. But yeah, okay, so tonight we're here. We're gonna talk about mixed use and complete neighborhoods. Some terms gonna be new, some terms are gonna be old. We sent a pretty big packet for review. I hope you enjoyed it. Anybody had the chance to read it? We'll go through it. We'll go through it in a bit. You're gonna see some familiar things. But the first slide, that I want to go over with is why are we talking about this? Why is mixed use and complete neighborhood something that we should be discussing? First and foremost, state law. State law, the state of Maryland Department of Planning adopted 12 visions back in 2009, and state vision number 4 has to do with community design and states that compact mixed use walkable design consistent with existing community character and located near available or planned transit options is encouraged to ensure efficient use of land and transportation resources and preservation and enhancement of natural systems, open spaces, recreational areas, and historical, cultural, and archaeological resources. That's a mouthful, but one important thing to know about that statement is that the character of the existing community has to play a role in that. Many times when people speak about mixed use or just mention the word, we all think about, tall building, some sort of office or retail, and then some housing in there too. But there is mixed use that can be done at very different scales with very different architectural features, and the community character of how does that look like? That's really key about that statement. But so starting from there, what happened during the Plan 2040 draft? We actually had several goals and policies and strategies that are related to mixed use that were adopted in the General Development Plan. And some of these we're actually going to work on tonight. We have overarching goal BE8 to encourage hubs of limited commercial and community services for rural and suburban areas and residents in locations where such uses exist or have traditionally existed. That means, for example, that sure, you're not expecting some sort of large hub of commercial or office services near residential, predominantly residential established neighborhood. However, you can and you should provide certain services that someone may need on a daily basis, regardless of their ability to drive a car somewhere else or walk, depending on their ability to do so. Another important thing that we're going to be working on tonight is policy C, the third one down. Through the region planning process, what we're working on tonight, evaluate the extent of land included in village center land use designations to accommodate the county's forecasted development needs. So we're going to have some maps later on during the exercise, and you're going to see where these village centers were designated. And at our table, we're going to be asking you to actually look at these boundaries and tell us what you think about them and what's there today, and how do these boundaries could be implemented in an efficient way. Click. And let's get into it. Again, this so a lot of this presentation is going to be related to the things you've read. The first thing is, in terms of design of places that we all move through, what are some of the things that matter? And really, the very basic component of anywhere where you walk around and that you experience is the people, the other life that moves around, maybe birds or other things, animals. But there's people that make a place unique. And these people move through space that is three-dimensional. And you get in inside a building or outside a building, and there is space in between. And everything we perceive in terms of buildings and land development has to do with how people move through different spaces and get there and then use these spaces. If you read the extracts from Jan Gill, I think that he does a great job at explaining why it's important for people to move through these spaces, making sure that their senses are actually engaged in a way that keeps us doing a good job at moving around in life and keeps us interested. Click. This is one image from his book. This one that talks about the way that the human eye is meant to perceive things. We're not robots. We're not superhuman. There are certain distances beyond which we're not comfortable looking at things. And he says 19.5 meters. Or in this case, a fifth story of a structure. So that's why, really, really tall towers, for example, when they're designed and constructed, they give us a really different feel regarding how we relate to them, because we can't see beyond what is happening on the top story. We can't see, and if you're sitting up there, you can't really see who's that person downstairs. So there are certain physical elements of our senses that have to do a lot with how we can actually perceive things in our daily lives. And same thing is with the angle. We're the way that our eyes are set, we're meant to see things in front of us, not up from us. So again, when buildings are designed, when uses are taking place either at the ground floor of a building or at the 20th floor, it makes a big difference regarding on how do we like a place, how do we enjoy it. Click. In terms of relationship between structures and between spaces, another very interesting thing. I don't know if you've ever thought about, why is this street so narrow, or what does it feel so narrow? There's matters of relations and scale between how tall structures are on the sides or how wide a right of way is. And that's a quote that is hard to read by the Congress for New Urbanism, that talks about a 1-to-3 ratio of right of way. So that is the street, the road, the entire length, the width of it, sorry, is 3 times the height of the structures that delimit it. That is one of the ratios that many people think it's ideal. And sometimes when you go to a old, I don't know, old world town, or a town like, or an old city like Annapolis, you see these ratios and you realize that actually, there is some elegance in that type of ratio scale between objects. Where if you have, a 10-lane right of way of a roadway, and then a single story building on each side, that doesn't feel the same. Part of it is the sense of enclosure. Humans like to feel protected, and that's why they stand closer to, certain things at their back, so nobody can jump on them. Some stuff is primitive. It's primordial. Other things have to do with safety. Another reason why ratios like the 3-to-1, some people consider the better, is because they provide drivers with something that makes them feel like it's narrower, the street, especially the faster they go, the narrower the street feels. So the more they're likely to decrease their speed, because they feel like the buildings are actually going towards them, they're going to crash. While wide open space with a very narrow, very small scale building on the side, it actually incentivizes speed, and it's been proven. There's data that shows how there's actually more crashes, and for speed design, that's very important as a ratio. Click. And this is one of the streets that I was talking about. You all know this. And how does it make you feel? Raise your hand if this photo makes you feel like it's a good place to walk down or go to, or not. Is it a yes? Okay. And what do you like about it? Just a couple of things. Let's take 2 hands. So historic importance and beauty, although it was built for horses in initially. This one, it looks a little less than that. It feels like it's a little taller, right? It's a little narrower. It's narrower, right? Right. Yes, probably the incline at 4 degrees gives. Yes, a vista, terminating vista, where you have something that you're going towards. That's right, perception. And I'm just repeating for the people at home, sorry, because they can't totally hear you. That's why I sound silly, but perception and design it from down up. That's right. So yes, there's so much that goes into a place that is not just a use. What is the use in it? We haven't gone into use much looking at this, but there's a lot of feelings that we have about this photo. Click. This is a diagram that I remade again from Jan Gill. I don't know if you noticed this in the extracts, but this is a very interesting slide. So on top, you have quality of the physical environment, and you can divide it into poor quality, good quality, and then you have activities that humans actually carry out through their daily lives as they go by. We have necessary activities such as work, eat, optional activities that are things that they choose to do, they don't have to do, and then we have resultant activities or the social activities. Now the interesting thing, and this is why this bubble is red, is because the amount of time that people actually decide to do activities that are social is he observed by doing old school surveying that is really what gets out of a very good environment, because it doesn't matter if an environment is as the quality is poor or good, they still need to go to work. It doesn't matter if they have a sidewalk or if it's near a brown field that is an awful place to go by. They still got to go to work. Now the optional ones, obviously everybody's going to want to go out and do the things that they don't need to do, but they want because maybe they have a big park next to their house or a museum to go. But what really is interesting to look at is how many things do not happen in terms of social activity unless you do have a good environment. And that's what really I think we should strive for in anyone should strive for in their community. Click. So in terms of where these activities happen, if you look at a section of a street, doesn't matter if it's a downtown or a small neighborhood, you have these things. You have a public space in the middle that here is pretty much the middle of the road width. Then you have the easier thing to look at is that you have the private property, right? That's how we do planning. If somebody comes into private property, they that is their piece of land. But now there is a very interesting zone, which is the public realm, that actually goes the front of a building, including it, all the way across the street and onto the other. And it kind of tells you that there is something else that is not private and not public, but it just in the sense of when you're walking, you perceive part of your reality, even though there may be someone else's house or someone else's shop. But there is this really neat interaction about how we just perceive public, private realm, and the ground floor. Now, when I was talking about the way that our vision is set, things that we immediately see are the ones that are at the ground level. There is a reason why ground level stores or spaces are the ones that have the most premium, and because you see things that are at that level. And this is why, for example, when you're designing a building that may have 2, 3, 4 stories, a lot of times you put more money in the ground floor because this is what people actually see. Nobody can see if you have a really cool mosaic on the 5th floor. If you go look at old buildings, that's what they used to do back in the day as well. In the early 1900s, you get the detail of architectural design that just decreases as high up the building goes, because you don't need to put money into the 20th story of a building. But so this ground floor, in terms of a mixed use building, for example, is really what you want to look for. And that's why a lot of codes, for example, require ample fenestration or some way of making that ground floor better looking, because that is what we would perceive if we were walking by it. Click. And this is just a photo. Anybody knows where this is? Anybody guesses? It's Savannah. One of the most beloved by planners, and this is what do you think in here is public or what is private or what is the public realm? And anybody show of hands? Anybody want to give it a try? Yes. Mm-hmm. That's right. That's right. Click. And this is another way of understanding elements that you can utilize when you're making designs of structures. On the left, you have here things that inhibit context, such as walls, as opposed to no walls on the right side. Another thing you can do is actually having long distances or short distances. You can design for high speeds or for slow speeds, and there is a big, a big pro in designing for low speeds. They actually managed to get people to look at each other in the eye. If I'm going very fast on a vehicle, could be a car, it could be a very fast bicycle, I don't have chance to say hello to anyone that is speeding past me opposite way. If I'm walking somewhere, I can actually recognize somebody, and maybe I realize that, oh, it's my neighbor from 2 streets down. Maybe today I'm gonna say hi. That's something that just can't happen unless you design for slow speeds. Now, I'm from Italy, and there's another movement that we, I'm proud to say we invented, the slow food movement. It's just eating slow. And it sounds silly, but taking things in a way at a different speed, either walking or moving through spaces or eating, it's something that can actually give a lot in terms of social interactions and dynamics between people that live in a community. And then it's okay, we can skip the last two. Now, those are some of the you saw these sketches by Leon Krier. Some of them I thought they were hilarious. We don't have to go through all of them, but let's go to the next one. This one is one of my favorites: architectural speech versus architectural stutter. With the top one being a speech where you can obviously see, diversity of structures, different elements, and then you have below I mean, I think we can all see which one we would probably be in if we had to pick. Click. And this is interesting too. This is kind of it's looking at a city or at a place almost from a biological replication, right? Kind of like a cell that duplicates into with the top is a mature city that filled all the space it had, all the lots that were developable, they were developed, and then there's land next to it, and then you pretty much have two choices. Number one, you just maintain a very, very low profile built bulk, up past the bridge. but then necessarily to accommodate that, you need to go up in the middle. Or what you can do is actually provide almost like the same ratio of people per square foot, and then duplicate in terms of scale. So you never get the huge monstrosity, which is the big, city, and then the very low replication of those other smaller buildings, but you actually get a that kind of medium type place in terms of people and places and things. Now, one of the advantages of this last one is that potentially doesn't matter where you are within this, you still have this this much space that you got to go through to get to church, versus up there you probably got to go all the way across. And if you're lucky, you're in a place that actually has a some kind of good public transit to go to church in the big city, but sometimes you don't have it, and then you probably got to next. This is another good one that actually talks about how usually things are done in the suburban world versus the urban world. And the big takeaway here is you start from where do you set the building. Suburban zoning codes, they tell you to set the building right in the middle. You have a 20 to 30 foot front setback, pretty much same from the sides, and then maybe if you're lucky, you get a 5 foot rear setback. But that's the plot. In the urban world, you would put your building on the edge. And what happens in the first case? So let's go back to the suburban one. What happens is that because the building is so in the middle, to delimitate the space and make sure that the person next to you or the people that go by your place, they know that that's your land, you got to build a wall around it or a fence, because otherwise it's open. In the other case, in the urban world, the building is actually what tells people, oh, that is this person's land, shop, house. And what happens when that gets replicated in the suburban world, you end up with many buildings that have each many fences around, and then it's kind of like this type of environment versus an environment where the buildings lie in the streets in an urban area. And then you have the internal space to actually do things such as maybe it's parking. It's still surface parking, but it's hidden. So it's actually what happens here, maybe at the ground floor, or maybe it's a courtyard. But it's just interesting how there's a completely different way of understanding space in relationship to a lot or to a block in a suburban versus an urban environment. Click. And let's. I just wanted to ask you. Raise of hand again. Somebody new. Did you guys look at these? Or just from what you saw tonight? What do you think about these? Or any comments on these? What makes you feel or think? Yes.
I mean, most of Europe has done a good job planning, like the third one there, where city, like if you go to Budapest or go to Prague or you have a city built bridges across, so they rebuilt the same city with similar architecture and opportunity in the same spot. We seem to be really good at number two, like a Baltimore, New York City or something like that, and then having suburbs built out, or Annapolis with the Broad Lake Peninsula just across a bridge, to think of one, or Edgewater on the other side of it. So it'd be nice to build number threes, but I don't see people like their space. It comes down to it. They're accustomed to it, and to take it away from them is hard. So the mixed use development gets lost.
Yeah, just to sort of carry on to Bo's point, I think it might also just be a cultural difference too, because of it between Europe and here. And I think the one of the preservation of private space is one of those things. Overall, I mean, I agree with the more European model, and if we could implement that here, I think that would be more beneficial. Especially I liked the previous presenter's point about how historic buildings are better for conserving energy, especially in the climate crisis. So, but yeah, it just might take some education of the public to, because I mean, not everyone's going to be able to be educated on this level about this sort of thing. And but thank you for putting this together for us to learn.
Yeah, yeah, but I see. And you're right. You're both right. Make great points. And the interesting thing is that we do have, I mean, the first photo we looked at tonight was Annapolis. It was sure there was a definitely a big European imprint. I mean, the governor was using books that he got from landscape architects from Italy or whatnot. But it used to be here at some point before something happened, and then spoiler alert, has to do with Arundel. Let's click. It's coming right now. I mean that photo, that's St. Anne. It's traditionally human settlements have developed in mixed use patterns. It's industrialization and the fact that people could actually move more than than 10, 15 minutes, that things changed. Because otherwise, if you move on by foot or on horse, until the 1700s, people used to live fairly close, unless they needed a lot of land to do things, primary resources, and they were doing businesses and things that was the main, not merchants, not lawyers. So the use of the land was very much dictated by how much you could move around. And what happened after that is that we evolved with horse car, cable car, railroad suburbs from the 1830s to 1930s, and the commute stayed the same because they were not very fast. These things, cable cars, were not super fast. They still maintained a certain way to commute within a reasonable time, but they were able to expand a little further away. But the big thing happened with when automobile became popular, and if you look at when subdivisions were developed in Region 4 too, you're gonna see that there was this belief that, hey, this is amazing. I can live. Back then it was maybe just a 2-lane parkway that would go from Annapolis to somewhere in Region 4, and there was not all that traffic. They would just drive, and it was a miracle, literally a miracle. And at the same time, in the mid 1800s, that's when zoning codes became popular, and the belief that you can you're gonna have it better if you can prohibit certain things from happening in certain areas, and then for each city, each county, you can adopt a big map that has different colors. The yellow is where only homes can be built. The red is usually where you can have shops, and then you have some purples and blues for industrial zones. And I mean, there was a big push for that, was because literally there were farms or heavy manufacturing happening right next to homes, which it happened here too. I mean, just look at the industrial history of Baltimore, for example. It's you can see that, and we can also discuss a lot of very very bad things that happen in terms of where did these places decided to locate, and near which communities, and there's a whole equity issue with that. But fundamentally, what happened is that zoning became popular, and the main thing that we do things in this country by segregation of uses. Do you sell something, or do you sleep on this lot? And that is what it is. Click. With that being said, mixed use has a lot of benefits. Are not they're not related to a heavy industrial use or something that is inherently bad to a neighborhood or a community that lives somewhere. you can have, there's the benefits of having shops or restaurants or a gym or childcare next to where you live. Uh, like, and there's really two types of mixed use that we wanted to talk about tonight. One is horizontal. So it's a neighborhood that actually, may have buildings that are all having one use. I think we can all see here, there are some, those are all homes. But then you can see there is a K&H Electric is right by the corner. Or there is a church over there. And I'm pointing at the map. So those are neighborhoods that actually have elements that are in different buildings, but nearby, so you can use them. So some of the benefits of mixed-use neighborhoods are that they have a strong ability to adapt to changing environments, because depending on perhaps some economic cycles or different things that happen, you get the diversity of a portfolio of businesses of things. So if something happens, you still have, and perhaps maybe nobody goes anymore to a bookstore because everybody orders books online. But then you still have the shop next door that makes really good tacos, and that store stays open, and you have a better chance, just in terms of a portfolio of places of uses, to have a thriving community by having a diverse community in terms of what different uses there are. And I can't stress enough, greatly reduce traveling distances. They're good not just because of time, not just because I may not be able to afford a car, or maybe 3 cars. If I have 3 family members, maybe I need 3 cars if I don't have that proximity. But also, we did the public health workshop not long ago, and we saw what benefits there are for just perhaps a 10-15 minute walk every day to get groceries or to pick up my child at school. Finally, community socialization that brings together employees, visitors, and residents all within a confined area. So you don't have just the neighbors that you sleep next to, but you have the neighboring grocery store, and you know them by first name. And at the same time, you tend to have longer hours for the life of a community, because they're not just 9 to 5 or 5 to 9 and then they empty out, but it's actually a longer time, and you actually save resources with that. For example, I'll mention it later on, but you can get parking benefits by doing that, because the same people that actually take the car and drive it out in the morning, then they empty that space for people that come in to work. So you actually get some good benefits from that. Click. Does anybody recognize this place? It's in Maryland. That's Hagerstown. How does it look? How does this photo make you feel? Who likes it? Raise your hand. What do you like about it? Few things. Shout one thing that you like. That's true. They even got the good ones that kind of extend, so you can actually go all the way here to cross a smaller spot instead of going, the extra mile. Mm-hmm. Good landscaping too. It's shaded, right? You're not in the heat. Variety of locally owned businesses. That's right. Those are pretty short. What is it? Maybe like 10-15 feet of a bay, 2 bays. Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to build something like that nowadays. People that build things, usually they try to build larger, bigger, large tenant anchor. It's a challenge. It's not easy, and it's for different reasons. You need to coordinate with multiple people to build something like that. And obviously, I mean, this was back in the day. It's different things now, but definitely our zoning codes in general, they're just more catered towards larger build outs, larger buildings. And but some people still do this, and the smaller stores that we have, maybe the historic ones that we mentioned, we should be able to do something to actually at least incentivize the these businesses to keep going. Click. And I feel like I need to start wrapping up here, but some benefits of this is the vertical mixed use, right? So you have one use at the bottom floor and then multiple uses at the upper floors. And the things that these are for is that, I'm going to start from the last one. They provide a consistent market for service and retail businesses, because you have the store downstairs that actually gets customers from whoever lives above. And but other things that you could do is, for example, somebody could operate a small business at the ground floor and then live. They don't have the customers upstairs, but it's their own. Or sometimes in studios or light industrial spaces, you could have an artist that actually saves money because they don't need a studio to work in, or an office to work in, because their office is also their place where they live. So they only pay one rent, or they pay one mortgage. Click. Again, this is so Hagerstown has this Main Street that is actually recognized by the Main Street Maryland program. If you go on their website, if you're interested, they have really good examples of great main streets that usually have some common elements, among which are great landscaping, sidewalks, and they actually provide assistance for these main streets, designating them, maybe giving them. I believe that they give some assistance for developing a branding or a website. But think there's no. I can tell you, there's no Region 4 Main Street on the program. But why not? Why can't we make it?
It's not, like, I suspect, well, I know, it's gonna be street, that's the highway, it's taking all. Traffic. That issue. It's 40 area in Massachusetts, where industrial, all the factories are driven by water, power, and housing still is back, which is kind of like not completely zoned, which is how that's developed. Workers have lived somewhere close enough to that factory. And they do have big streets. They're not all nice. But they kind of, they have it, it's not a mountain road, it's not a Ritchie Highway. And where do you stop? On the mountain road or Ritchie Highway, there is no.
Well, and it's well parking lot rather than a main street. So you go to shop and you don't want to stop and hang out. then it's just parking.
Well, hold that thought, because then we're gonna go into the village centers later, and maybe there is something that we can do about it. Jessica? All right, now we're we're gonna do a little dive in the actual county code regulations and some percentages of zone land and mixed use land use. First things first, mixed use in county code is regulated by zoning and zoning overlays mostly. We actually have Article 18, Title 8 that has mixed use districts and outlines what uses can be actually carried on a mixed use zone. And these 4 districts primarily, well, there are only 4. It's MXDR, MXDC, MXDE, and MXDT. That denominator, the last letter, actually indicates if it's a transportation focus for the T, a residential focus for the R, commercial is for the C, and employment is for the E. Even though this sounds very complex, it boils down to certain uses are not allowed in one or the other. However, as you can see, for example, all the townhomes are allowed in all of them. But this is not typical. Some change, but each this list is very long. The list of uses, we could go down, I believe, 80 or something like that. But we have a table for each. Now, what changes is that number one, there are some incentives that county code allows for developments that are mixed use. However, you can't use them unless you're developing 10 acres plus. So smaller projects they actually can't really benefit from a lot of these allowances for uses. Or so if you were to build a small mixed use building, you most likely could not do it easily. So that's one thing that just studying. And I've been fairly few months with the county, so I've been studying the code and getting to see what aspects there are. I worked in different jurisdictions that have different mixed use regulations, and this is something that struck me as something interesting. And in terms of oddity, obviously it favors larger developments, but 10 acres to me sounds like a big greenfield project that it definitely does not assist what we were looking at earlier, the smaller mom and pop store, small business, which is already burdened by a lot of other things because of economies of scale. It's harder to make a small project. I don't personally see the reason why you would want to make it a little more burdensome from not allowing special benefits for mixed use if you're trying to incentivize it, like we say in our general development plan. So that's something to consider. Maybe that's something that we could change potentially. And the other thing that is important is that for these MXD, R, C, E, or T, there is percentages that are fixed numbers, fixed quotas, say, that you need to hit to actually have your development approved. So for the R, you need to have between 50 and 80% of residential. And for C, you need to have 15 to 45% of commercial space in your project. This, we can all see why that's important, right? Because if you have these designations, you mean trying to do something specific. But now, when I looked at this, one of the things that may not, be immediate to, to us is that development is not that easy that you can guarantee that there is a specific amount of square footage that is going to work for you to pencil out a project to have 45% something or 40%. I mean, there is a lot of the financials behind the project. Sometimes they don't allow for the very exact numbering to actually be hit for project to exist. And what happens more often than not is that it's harder to have the commercial quota make sense without some of the higher residential component. But if, regardless of the actual details of, why do you have this percentage versus that percentage, if you're trying to foster mixed use, I think that it could be good to say, oh, you may provide a mix of uses without being so exact on one. Granted that, we're not talking about, oh, it's going to be just an apartment with with an ATM machine. That's not what we're talking about. So that's something to consider. Yeah. And planners. It's I don't know so the ordinance was adopted in the early 2000s, and it's I've been tasked, and Jessica as well, to look at mixed use regulations and look at our neighbors, what they're doing in nearby counties, and see if there are some best practices that we can actually implement to improve. We don't know yet. We don't know yet. We're still observing. We're still gathering data, but those are some of the elements that why we have the feeling, we have the perception that we can do better in terms of how mixed use development and mixed use neighborhoods work or can work, not just in Region 4, but in the county as a whole. Especially if we look around and we see some other projects that we really like, and like, why isn't this happening here? Yes.
I have a question about that. Essentially asking for flexibility in the code, and I think it makes sense. So that way you're not, markets change. So if you've got flexibility, developer landowners can decide what goes based on what the market needs. Now, if we in this area decide, hey, we want some flexibility here, because this is the zoning for the whole county. So how does it relate to what other small areas are doing? And how do we reconcile we think versus what they think at the end?
Yeah. So what Jessica and I are looking at is actually countywide, and we're gonna come up with some ideas that we could do, and everything has to do with an ordinance and a very public process and things like that to change code, to change programs. You could incentivize, and I have a slide later on that. But in terms of Region 4, what's the difference between what we can do in Region 4 and what we can do outside? In Region 4, we can actually, when we're going to be adopting a zoning map, we do have overlays, and we do have zoning that could be adopted to allow more mixed use. In terms of what are the regulations behind those mixed use categories, that would need an amendment, that is something that is overarching. But maybe you can relate it to a specific corridor. Maybe you can say that, I don't know, along XYZ road, from here to there, because you're trying to foster a different kind of environment, you would allow, so and so. And that is kind of what they did with the Breck mixed use bill ordinance. This is number 3. I'm jumping down here. It allows certain uses that are not normally allowed if the parcel is within 4-mile radius of Fort Meade and a minimum of 5 acres. It allows large grocery stores. It allows dwellings that are allowed in the R5 zoning. So, you could do something of that sort in terms of what tool you can use. I'm not saying that, you need to have those uses, but you could say, oh, if you're along this road, if you're near this village center, if you're inside this village center, maybe you can do something that you couldn't do otherwise. And the benefit to that is, you need to find what is the benefit that you can provide to, there's an exchange. You allow something to get something as a community. Yes. Yes. Let's we have 45 minutes left. Yes. So I think let me just give you a, I think we can get down here. just before we go, click to the very last slide that talks about the 8 designated centers, because we can also talk about mixed use more in the mixed use group. I just wanted, what we're going to be talking about on this side of the room is Region 4 actually has 8 designated village centers. And you can see, click one back, Jessica, sorry. You can see we have downtown Arnold, uh, an area here near Green Valley Marketplace, an area here in Cape St. Clair at the strip mall, downtown Severna Park, Magothy Bridge and Highway 2, Main Street, Riviera Beach, and the Mountain Road corridor that includes downtown Jacobsville. Now, what I would like you to think as we go through these materials, and we're going to talk about this at the tables, is what can we do with these designations? What when you hear village center, what do you think that is something that can be done better? And do these look like village centers to you? And if not, why? And I want to discuss these boundaries to you because, like we saw in slide number 1, we're supposed to evaluate those during this process. So, we want your input to actually see what kind of things would you like to see there and why. And I think with that, we can actually get into the group tables. They are drastically different. It could take it into account. It does not today. Today, it just says these are the designated village centers. There was, and this map was adopted, as part of the general development plan. Those are the village centers overlays. Now, the key thing too is that we have in the GDP, we have designated town centers, and then we have designated village centers. And there's a big difference in scale. So things that, you would see in the Pearl Town Center, we're not talking about that in, downtown Severna Park. So that is kind of like the two scales that we came up with during the GDP process to kind of differentiate. And the big difference is that village center is supposed to mainly cater to the neighborhoods around it. So, a place like downtown Arnold would serve, perhaps this community and versus this one that would serve this community. So we're going to be talking about uses, things that you may want to see in some of these areas. So if you especially if you live there or work there, come sit at my table and let's discuss it. Well, I don't know. We have a zoning map. We can discuss, how that looks. But ideally, at least in my experience, what I've seen, working in planning for almost 10 years, is sometimes you don't want to be so exact in terms of dictating what kind of thing happens where, as long as it's not a steel factory and it's not, 150 units. It's if you're talking about a wine shop or a hamburger store or a childcare, perhaps, and it's a limited space that perhaps is 2,000 square feet, 5,000 square feet. Does it matter if it's in an area that is a village center, even though it's not commercial too? Maybe not. But that's a question for you. Pick your table. Mixed use is on this side. Cultural resources is on that side, and we'll report back at 8.
All right, I think we're gonna come back and share some stuff.
Yes, okay, we have some time. We've got about a few minutes to share what happened in our groups. I'm just gonna call it. Anybody would like to share something? And let's start with the cultural resources group. Yes.
This is Emma Buckman. Yeah, we just identified a couple of places, historically important places that we noted in Region 4. One was Beechwood Park, which was once a thriving Black-owned business, essentially, is the most basic way they can put it. And it was overrun. It was something similar to what happened to the old Fourth Ward in Annapolis. So I think that's culturally and historically important to highlight that connection. There was a couple of other places like Fort Smallwood. There's an archaeological site there that was important. But yeah, so just there are a few of them that are, and we also noted there were a few that we felt that were threatened that we should be stepping up more to protect. Yeah.
Thank you. Is there anything else from that table that anybody wants to share? Okay. What about the mixed use table? Who would like to kind of tell what the discussion was like?
We kind of had a question about, since a lot of these shopping areas that are being designated as mixed use are already owned by private companies or whatever, how much say do we really have in what can happen with those places? But if we could do anything, we would like more like public park mixed with commercial development to make places where people can, interact with community, kind of like the way in Annapolis you can shop or walk around and hang out. And what else did we say? We would like to see more walkability and ease of access to the areas from surrounding neighborhoods. And I can't really remember anything else. Anybody else?
Thank you. Well, this concludes our activity. We will talk about this more in the when we're drafting recommendations, I think, for the plan. But thank you so much for contributing, and thank you for staying with us tonight. Cultural Resources, that was great. Now, as we're concluding for tonight, before we open it up for public comment, more questions, contact us. We have our staff's email up there. We have the chair and vice chair's emails. And the questionnaire is on. If you just tuned in or you didn't hear earlier, we have a questionnaire for the visioning. What is that specifically? That is a questionnaire that asks you what things you would like to see in the long term in Region 4. We're going to have photos. We ask you to rank them, tell us what you like about them, what you don't like about them, and we'll get all that data and then present it back to you all and the community. And then I'll pass it to Anne for public comment.
Yeah, we'd like to open it for public comment. Okay. Anybody else have a comment from the audience or from the members? How about people online? How do we hear them? Nobody there. Okay. All right. Well, maybe it's that time when we can ask if there's a motion to adjourn. Okay. And I don't think that we really have any, I mean, people that will abstain on that, but if we're, okay. Okay. Is there a second? Okay. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay. Well, and thank you for these both very interesting presentations. Not too much.